I promise that this is not an attempt in the first installment of the Dennis Manoloff Show to be hot take guy. I loathe hot take guy or gal. I don't say things for the sake of shock value. I say them because even if it's only fleeting, I believe what I believe. And at this moment, I believe in the Cavs, all 18 and 32 of them. I should know better than to overreact to one game, but that's exactly what I'm going to do where the Cleveland Cavaliers are concerned. Their 125-101 beatdown of the Spurs in San Antonio on Monday night was so impressive that it had me, if not guzzling wine and gold Kool-Aid, at least easing it into my veins via an IV. I see no reason the Cavs can't qualify for the play-in tournament at the end of the 72-game season. The tournament in each conference that pits the number 7 to 10 seeds against each other for the right to be called the 7th and 8th seeds for the actual NBA playoffs. That's what the San Antonio game did to me. That's what Darius Garland's spectacular performance in the San Antonio game did for me. Now, hear me out, please. Allow me to articulate why I rationally think the Cavs can contend for the number 10 seed in the Eastern Conference, which would guarantee that play-in tourney. 7 plays 8. That loser plays the winner of 9-10. If the winner of 9-10 wins that second game, that team is the 8th seed in the respective conference. Here's the situation with the Cavaliers. For all of their foibles and bad performances, they still have beaten this season Philadelphia twice, including once in Philly when the 76ers played Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, Atlanta twice, Brooklyn twice, including once when the Nets defeated the trio of James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant. That was the debut of those three as teammates. In that game, 147-135, double OT for the Cavs in Cleveland. Colin Sexton scored 42. Darius Garland, his backcourt mate, didn't even play. He was out because of injury. By the way, Durant, Irving, and Harden combined to score 96 in 149 minutes. Cavs have also beaten Boston once and Toronto once. Toronto, when the Raptors started Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Norman Powell, and OG Anunoby. I get that the Cavs have lost 32 times. That's patently obvious. And the majority of those losses have been by blowout. On balance, the Cavs have not performed all that well against quality competition. I'm not saying the Cavs are an upper tier Eastern Conference team, by no means. But I am saying that they are good enough to compete for that play-in tournament. Now, before we continue, I have to make sure that you understand this. 2 guys on the Cavs need to play sooner than later, need to return sooner than later in order for my play-in dream to be realized. Larry Nance Jr. and Jared Allen. Allen's been out because of a concussion, Jr. because of an illness. They've missed a handful of games. One or both, at a minimum, has to return in order for this dream to take place because they are too valuable to the Cavs to be out for too long. Nance and Allen in the front court provide the length, the athleticism, the size, the smarts, the defense. I mean, they play at both ends. That's the contingency here that has to happen. I need to see Allen and Nance, or Allen or Nance, come back sooner than later. All right. Why do I believe in the Cavs at this moment? Well, as I said, they're better than 18 and 32. Yes, they are rebuilding. Yes, they've had a lot of injuries. But I'm tired of excuses. All NBA teams, all professional teams have injuries. As for the rebuild, I'm tired of that excuse too, because Plenty of teams are rebuilding. The Cavs are in their third season post LeBron 2.0, the third season of the latest rebuild. This isn't the first season or the second, it's the third. I'm not saying that I expected them by now to be a world beater, but I'm not going to sit here and watch the Cavaliers for another 2, 3, 4, 5 years and say, well, you can't expect much out of them because they're rebuilding. No, it's time for the Cavs and their personnel to stop with the rebuild. And I don't know. I guess you could say they don't use it as an excuse, but those on the outside who simply say, well, the Cavs are rebuilding, what do you expect? I expect more. That's what I expect. Another reason why I believe in the Cavs, despite 18-32. The Eastern Conference beyond the third seed is a jumbled assortment of mediocrity and junk. Let me see here as I take a look at the standings. Brooklyn leading the way, then Philly, then Milwaukee. The fourth seed in the Eastern Conference was 26-24 Atlanta at the time of our taping of this show. Fifth seed 26-24 Miami. Sixth seed 25-24 Charlotte. Seventh seed 25-25 Boston. Eighth seed 25-26 New York. So the eighth seed in the Eastern Conference had a sub 500 record through 51 games. More importantly for this discussion, the 10th seed, Chicago Bulls, 20-28. 8 games under 500 through 48. The 9th seed, Indiana, 22-26. In other words, the Eastern Conference is available for even a bad team to sneak in to 7-10. Another reason I'm confident in the Cavs. The remaining schedule is incredibly favorable, especially if some of the opponents are, wink, wink, not exactly motivated to win. And we know some of them won't be. They'll be eyeballing the draft. The Cavs can capitalize on that as long as they aren't eyeballing the draft. As long as they are saying, we want to win games. We're tired of punting on seasons. The remaining schedule for the Cavs, of course, the 125-101 victory over the Spurs snapped the 5-game skid. At Oak City has an unrecognizable roster. Home to Toronto. We'll see if Kyle Lowry is back by then, but Toronto is easy pickings at the moment. Home to New Orleans, all right, might be a tough game. At Charlotte, nothing to worry about. Shouldn't be. Golden State at home. All right, they can give you a problem, perhaps, but they've been getting blown out in various ways. Even if I give you a loss to the Golden State Warriors, look at these next 5 games. At Chicago, at Detroit, terrible Detroit. At back home to Chicago. At Charlotte, at terrible Washington. Then at Toronto, home to Orlando, home to Washington. So you're looking at counting the Spurs with counting that victory 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's a 13-game stretch. Then Spurs would make it 14. Where I believe the Cavs can go 10-4. I truly believe that. And you go ahead and laugh. I believe the Cavs can go 10-4 in their next 14, and that includes the victory over the San Antonio Spurs. So they would need to go 9-4 in their next 13. It's doable. And I'm not just sitting here with pie in the sky hope. At this time of the year, when a team is 18-32 or in that neighborhood, it is convenient to talk draft. And this year's draft is shaping up to be really good at the top. But I submit the Cavs have been working on the top end of the draft enough. It's time to start winning. 4 players come to mind, all 22 years or younger, 3 of whom were drafted by the Cavs, one who was legally stolen by the Cavs. Number 1, Jared Allen, the center. 25.00 player efficiency rating. It's outstanding. 13.1 points, 9.9 rebounds. 4th season out of Texas. Just 22 years old. He will turn 23 on April 21st. He was the 22nd overall pick by Brooklyn in 2017. Number 2, Colin Sexton. 3rd season out of Alabama. 8th overall pick in 2018. Currently 23.9 points, 4.2 assists. The player efficiency rating is not what you'd like to see. 19.97, ranking 66th. But he's a good player, and he's 22 years old. Number 3, Darius Garland, his backcourt mate. 2nd season out of Vanderbilt. 5th overall pick in 2019. 16.7 points, 5.7 assists. As with Sexton, the PER is not where you want it to be. 15.24, ranked 133rd. He's got to be better than that. I get it. But he's played just 100 career NBA games, 14.1 points, or at least through his first 100 career NBA games. 14.1 points, 4.7 assists. 21 years old. And number 4 of the players I'm citing for why the Cavs don't need to look to the draft this year, Isaac Okoro. In his rookie season out of Auburn, 5th overall pick, 8.1 points, 2.8 rebounds. A horrible player efficiency rating. Yes, 7.64. But he's 20 years old, and as recently as April 3rd, he played really well in the Cavs' loss at the Miami Heat. And none other than Jimmy Butler of the Heat said this about Sir Isaac Okoro, quote, "His potential is out of this world. Hopefully he's 10 times better than I am. If he keeps working, the sky is the limit." So I know Isaac Okoro has frustrated Cavs fans periodically, with some of his games, and his shot looks weird in various ways, in various times. But if Jimmy Butler is going to say that about Isaac Okoro, then I'm on board with Isaac Okoro. So the point here is that when you have 4 core pieces, Allen, Sexton, Garland, Okoro, none of whom is older than 22. The oldest is Allen, who will turn 23 later this month. You don't have to keep talking about the draft. You can actually focus on winning. And then you sprinkle in a couple of the, NBA middle-aged guys such as Larry Nance Jr. and even Kevin Love, a guy that I've criticized over the years. I don't think he's all that in a bag of chips like a lot of people do. He's had trouble staying on the court. But he was on the court against San Antonio and did a nice job. If he can somehow stay healthy, he can help this team get to a 10 seed. So I am encouraged by the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I'll admit, if they had lost in San Antonio, let alone gotten run out of the building against the middling San Antonio Spurs, I mean, they're not the Spurs of Duncan, Parker, Ginobili, and Robinson. This is a mediocre team, but they're better than the Cavs. If the Spurs had handled the Cavs to make it 6 straight losses for Cleveland and 17-33 overall, then yeah, I wouldn't be saying what I just said. But the game that I saw on DVR last night after I got back from my radio show showed me a lot of good things. Career night for Darius Garland, but I don't see why Garland and Sexton in that backcourt can't carry this team the rest of the way to at least the 10 seed. All right. Coming up next on the Dennis Manoloff Show, we'll check in on the Cleveland Indians who have started their season in, shall we say, humdrum fashion.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Powell, co-host of the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast. Check us out anywhere you listen to podcasts. For all your Browns coverage, post-game, pre-game, anything you need Browns, you'll find it here on the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast.
You've been pining, you've been waiting for Rega and Rhoda to get back together. We gotcha. Press Play Podcast. We're ready to go. We're going to have our podcast with everything that you want. Browns, Cavaliers, Indians, Ohio State, the national scene. Kenny Rhoda, Michael Regai back together again. Make sure you keep your ears open. It's happening right here on Press Play Podcast. See you then.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read one book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show. We are now talking about the Cleveland Indians, who have gotten off to a slow start this season, to say the least. They opened the season in Detroit this past weekend, Easter weekend. Lost the first two, then won the third game. Lost the first two by a combined scoring of just, 4 runs. Yeah, so they scored 2 in the first loss, 2 in the second loss, and then won 9-3. In the series finale. Came home opener, as much pomp and circumstance as you could have in a pandemic season, albeit this time fans were allowed back in at a minimal amount. I think the crowd was 8,000 or something like that. But the Indians players turned in a dud for the home opener, losing to the Royals 3-0. They play again on Wednesday afternoon in the finale of their 2-game series before the Indians welcome the Tigers to Cleveland for a weekend set. So what to make of the Indians to this point? Not much. I would urge you anywhere and everywhere, Indians fans all over the world, don't overreact to a small sample size such as this one. You remember the great Sparky Anderson, legendary manager of the Reds and Tigers, used to talk about 40 games as the mark, as the benchmark. You don't really know your team until 40 games. I had a chance to ask Terry Francona in the run-up to the home opener on a radio show I was doing what he thought about that 40-game benchmark that Anderson was famous for. And, Francona, of course, tipped the imaginary cap to Anderson, a lot of respect for Sparky, but he basically said, hey, it's a team-by-team situation. It evolves, and you can't automatically say 40 games. Some have said Memorial Day. I think that it is up to each manager, and each manager knows what kind of team he has. Doesn't need 40 games to figure it out in a lot of cases. With the Indians, I think it's pretty apparent what team they have right now. You don't need that many games to figure it out. I'm not saying they're destined for a terrible season just because they started slowly, and I'm saying what team they have. I'm simply saying that regardless of the record, I'm looking at a club that has good starting pitching, led by Shane Bieber, the defending American League Cy Young and MLB Triple Crown winner for pitchers. They have bullpen pieces, including some power arms in the back, such as James Karinchak and Emmanuel Clase. So the pitching should be able to keep the Indians in the vast majority of games. The problem is going to be, and maybe I'll be proven wrong over time, but the problem is going to be for this club, offensive consistency. Will this team be able to score on a consistent basis? Through 4 games, it was 2 runs, 2 runs, 9 runs, 0 runs. I see that type of pattern continuing, even if it's not 3 losses in every 4 games. But I see this offense going hot and cold, and probably more cold than hot, which means the pitchers have to be really good in order for the Indians to win, i.e. 1-0, 2-1, 3-2. Why do I think the offense is not going to be consistent? Well, because there are precious few proven commodities in the lineup. And even those proven commodities have been prone to streaky seasons, such as Jose Ramirez. Third baseman Jose Ramirez has been an MVP candidate, but he's also gone through stretches where you sit there and you go, this player is unrecognizable. I am planning on Jose Ramirez having a really good season. If he doesn't, then the Indians are in real trouble. Because beyond Jose, who's proven, who has the Major League Baseball back of the baseball card resume? Well, Cesar Hernandez has done some things for a few years. He was solid for the Indians last year. Hopefully he's solid again. Roberto Perez has some pop behind the plate. I don't know how much more you expect from him offensively, though, because you're asking a lot of him already to call a game and defend, which he does well. Franmil Reyes, I got caught the other day when I was talking to a buddy of mine. I thought Franmil Reyes, even though he's young, had been around for a long time and played a lot of major league games. The reality is he hasn't. He's played less than the equivalent of 2 full major league seasons. And he had one, big power year. I think it was 37 home runs combined between San Diego and Cleveland after he was acquired by the Indians a couple of years ago. But Reyes is no guarantee. I mean, you'd like to think that he is. You'd like to think he's plug and play for 40 bombs. But he's still developing. Eddie Rosario has been around for a while. He's got credentials. However, he's in Cleveland on a 1-year deal because his production hadn't been quite up to snuff the past couple of years. He didn't get the big contract he was hoping for because of it. He has a career .310 on base. He's never really learned to command the strike zone like you'd want to see, to go with the power. So the reason the Indians were able to get Eddie Rosario was because he wasn't setting the world on fire offensively. He's looked good for the most part to open this season, and I hope it continues for Indians fans' sake. And I hope Eddie Rosario is worth at least 30 homers and 90 ribbies. That would be a huge boost. But there are plenty of question marks even beyond those guys who are no guarantees. You don't know what you're going to get out of shortstop if you're the Indians. You don't know what you're going to get out of center field. Right field, you want to hope Josh Naylor takes that job and runs with it, but he doesn't have a track record. You're not sure what you're going to get out of first base. So am I at all surprised when I see the Indians in fits and starts offensively to open a season? No. And another thing about it is, too, the expectations of the Indians overall, when you include everybody, hitters, pitchers, personnel, manager Terry Francona, coaching staff, the whole deal. My expectations for the Indians, before the season started, and I said this on the air, not much. I mean, I see them as mid to low 80s win total. I do not see them winning the division or even finishing second. I see the White Sox winning the division, the Twins finishing second, the Indians third. They'll be pushed by the Kansas City Royals. And then the Tigers, to me, are clearly the worst team in the AL Central. They're still far away in their rebuild. But the Royals have pieced together a nice little lineup, especially the top 5 or 6, in part because of the addition of, Carlos Santana, the former Indian. So I don't see the Indians doing all that well this season. I see them hanging around in the division in terms of contention just because the division is not great and the Indians have pitching. But ultimately, I think that the lack of offense is going to show itself to the extent that they're going to fade down the stretch. I hope I'm wrong for Indians fans' sake. Obviously, I hope I'm wrong. I'm an Indians fan from the day I was born, basically. So I want to see the Indians succeed. But I can't rationally look at what was done this offseason, more to the point, not done, and see what the Indians lineup is to this point and simply say, oh, yeah, well, give it time, give it a few months, and all these guys are going to start hitting, and all these guys are going to be hitting 300 and hitting bombs and doing all sorts of great stuff. And you watch, this offense is going to take off. I don't know that you can absorb the losses that the Indians suffered. I don't want to say suffered, allowed in the offseason, specifically 4 guys: shortstop Francisco Lindor, first baseman Carlos Santana, closer Brad Hand, and starter Carlos Carrasco. You don't lose talent of that caliber in that quantity and then replace it with question marks and expect to automatically be where you were last year, which was, in the playoffs and a good team, but a team that, fell to the wild card in the wild card series to the Yankees in the opening round. It's not like the Indians traded Lindor and Carrasco to the Mets, didn't re-sign Santana or declined his option, declined Hand's option, and replaced them with all-stars. No, they didn't. So I'm expecting this to be, in the words of the, and some who watch this game, I don't like to use it too much, but I see this as a transition year for the Indians, where their young guys are coming. They've got a nice group in the high minors, but they're not there yet. They're not ready to take over yet, guys like Nolan Jones. And as a result, this team in 2021, I don't expect them to compete all the way through the end of the season with the White Sox in Minnesota. All right, when we return to the Dennis Manoloff Show, I'll talk briefly about the Cleveland Browns, who, in my estimation, are having a pretty darn good offseason.
Hey, it's Tito, host of the Premier Fantasy Podcast. Get all the news and analysis you need to dominate your fantasy league. I've been doing this as long as anybody in the business. I can help give you the edge in your leagues. It's the Premier Fantasy Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show. We've talked Cavs, we've talked Indians. Now we get to talk Browns, who are in their offseason, coming off of a banner season. 11-5 in the regular, and then won a playoff game at Pittsburgh before falling to the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round. Yes, I'm still bitter about that loss. I believe the Browns should have won that game. Ultimately fell 22-17. Reason I felt they should have won it was because they had plenty of offensive firepower, and Patrick Mahomes, the uber-talented best quarterback in the NFL, was knocked out in the third quarter because of a concussion. The Browns needed to capitalize. They failed to do so, and that bothers me as a Browns fan through and through, just like I am with the Cavs and the Indians. But what do? You got to move on. But overall, the Browns did an excellent job in bursting back onto the scene and ridding themselves of the stench of the previous year, the 6-10 flop under Freddie Kitchens. Instead, they go 11-5 with a playoff victory under first-year NFL head coach Kevin Stefanski, All right. So what do the Browns do in the offseason? What have they done in the offseason to this point, knowing that the draft is coming up at the end of the month? Well, everywhere I look, I like what the Browns have done. Not only guys they've re-signed, such as Hollywood Higgins, the wide receiver, but guys they've signed. Who comes to mind? Who jumps off the page? Well, of course, safety John Johnson III, his defensive back mate in Los Angeles, Troy Hill, also signed by the Browns. Defensive tackle Malik Jackson, the grizzled veteran. I'd like to see him coming in here. Linebacker Anthony Walker. So the Browns have done a lot of good things in the offseason. And yes, they've lost some people, but I don't see any of the losses as crippling in terms of what they're trying to accomplish in 2021, even 2022, because we know the NFL, not for long. It's a short-term league. You can't guarantee anything, even day to day, let alone week to week, month to month, year to year, because of, among other things, attrition, injuries. Best laid plans of teams go astray, go awry when guys get injured, and it happens all the time in the NFL because it's such a physically demanding sport. But to this point, I have basically no complaints about how the Browns have conducted this offseason, an offseason in the aftermath of their 11 regular season victories and 1 playoff victory. The group led by general manager Andrew Berry, of course, Paul DePodesta's in that front office as well, and we know Kevin Stefanski's involved. It's the three-headed Ivy League monster, the Ivy League law firm of Depot, Berry, and Stefanski. They continue to demonstrate that they have a grasp of the situation. They know what they're doing. They know their roster. They obviously know the cap. I mean, they're very, very bright when it comes to all that stuff. So I trust them to this point. All that said, every team, or almost every team, thinks that they're having a good offseason. The vast majority, let's say, of teams, because of course there are going to be teams, fan bases of teams that say, we're having a terrible offseason. But the vast majority of teams, fan bases and personnel think, you know what, we're doing well in the offseason. We're going to come back strong when the lights come on. Well, that's how you have to filter it, in my opinion. You can't automatically say, well, my team is doing well in the offseason. That automatically means that we're going to be great. No, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. You're playing against competition. You're playing against other teams that have improved. And so there are no guarantees, even though, in my opinion, the Browns are having a good offseason, that they're going to be right back where they were even this past season. I mean, you can't guarantee me the Browns are going to be in the divisional round. I'd like to think it's going to happen. I want to see this team go to the Super Bowl and win it. But you never know from year to year. At least, though, Browns fans can take solace in the fact that there is competence in the front office. There's competence at head coach and the coaching staff. There is a good quarterback at the helm in Baker Mayfield. There are skill position players offensively who are good enough to win you a lot of games if everybody's healthy, or even if 90% of the roster's healthy. And on defense, this team has sought to improve where it desperately needed to. It has sought to improve, and I would expect that to continue on in the draft. So as of this moment, early April, I have basically no complaints about the Cleveland Browns, recognizing that the draft still has to come and there may be other cuts along the way, and you have to maneuver the salary cap perhaps. But as of right now, I'm as bullish on the Browns as I've been since, I don't know, the late 80s in the Bernie Kosar era.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Hi, my name is Sam Post, owner of Phenomwell CBD Store and PhenomwellCBD.com. That's like phenomenal, PhenomwellCBD.com. Tune in where we talk with experts about how the amazing hemp plant can make a difference for people's health and well-being from the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, it's JD from the Hyman Podcast. I created this podcast to have hard conversations. Conversations that make us human but are also wildly uncomfortable. Conversations that help give voice to the voiceless and to the marginalized. Now you can listen to the entire first season on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Consider this your personal invitation to join the conversation.
Welcome back to the Dennis Manoloff Show, the inaugural Dennis Manoloff Show, the first edition. And I thought we'd take this time, the final few minutes of the first show, to say thanks. It starts with my wife, the lovely and talented Denise, and my daughter, Grace, the rocks of my life. I love them beyond measure. Without them, I wouldn't be alive, let alone be doing a podcast. I'm extremely thankful to, of course, Press Play Podcast Network, my man Chase Smith and all his crew there at Press Play for giving me this opportunity. I'm very grateful to producer Carlos Medina, who is awesome at what he does, and he's going to help guide me through this because I've never done a solo podcast before, and that's why I ask you, the listenership, to bear with me on the stumbles and the mistakes. This is new to me and it is nerve-wracking, but I'm really grateful and thankful for the opportunity that I've been given by Press Play Podcast Network. And, I also want to go back to my childhood and say thanks to my late mom and my late father, my late mother, Linda, and my late father, Sam, who were incredible parents and gave me every opportunity to succeed growing up. And they always encouraged me. They knew I loved sports. My mom knew I loved to talk. She would have wished I didn't talk quite as much. My dad was excited when I embarked on my writing career, 30 years at the Plain Dealer. And that's another place where I want to say thank you. In addition to what I've already said, the people I've already thanked, I thank the Plain Dealer and Cleveland.com for my professional career, my first career as a newspaper reporter, as a sports reporter, and all the great people over there who helped me along the way. I also thank, growing up, my Bay Village High School class of 1985 and my Northwestern University class of 1989. Those people hold special places in my heart. I'm hoping we get a lot of listeners from those two classes because I grew a lot at Bay High School and I grew a lot at Northwestern University, and the people there in my respective classes were fantastic, and I really appreciate them. A lot of the people I hung with and knew were sports fans, are sports fans, so hopefully they can appreciate this show. And lastly, when I talk about thanks and gratitude, I want to thank two of the late greats who we lost in the calendar year 2021, Les Levine and Joe Tate, both icons in Northeast Ohio media, specifically sports media. And of course, Joe Tate, the legendary play-by-play voice of the Cavs and also the Indians on TV for a number of years. We lost both of them earlier this year, and they left indelible marks in my life. Les Levine was a mentor to me basically from the mid-90s on. He put me on television before anyone else ever did. I mean, I was on his show in the mid 90s, and he kept me on from that point till final show that he had. So Les Levine, I loved the man beyond measure. He was more than a professional mentor. He was like a second father to me. And Joe Tate was a huge mentor for me when I was going through high school and college. You know, I first contacted him in high school because I was into sports, and I wanted to be a play-by-play guy. And so I wrote Joe Tate a letter. He wrote me back. You know, I think about how rare that is these days. And by the way, he wrote it on actual paper with a pen, as opposed to an email. There wasn't such a thing, really. So Joe Tate, from that point on, kind of took me under his wing all through college, allowed me to pick his brain. I realized quickly I was never going to be a play-by-play voice to the caliber of Joe Tate, but we talked a lot about my future in journalism and sports journalism, and he rooted me on every step of the way, and you know, really helped me focus on getting a newspaper job and landing my dream job at the Plain Dealer in Cleveland beginning in 1990. And that tenure went all the way from 1990 to 2019. So I think about Joe Tate. I think about Les Levine. I hope they would be proud of me here with the Dennis Manoloff Show. That's how I wanted to wrap up today's show, with thanks. And I really appreciate this opportunity, and hopefully you've enjoyed listening to the first show, and you'll be back for the second and subsequent shows. All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Want to hear more about your favorite TV shows and movies that are on countless streaming services?
Then listen to Up Next with your new favorite hosts, me, Kristen Aviles,
And me, Christina Walter.
Every other week we'll highlight one genre, but 2 movies or TV shows, one old and one new.
We'll let you know what's hot and what's not from your favorite
or least favorite
streaming services.
And be sure to stay tuned to the end of each episode, where we shout out an artist whose name you should know for their talent in the industry.
So follow us to stay up to date with your favorite hosts from Up Next,
a part of the Press Play Podcast Network.